Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Joy Lesnick, and I'm the Acting Commissioner of NCEE and the Associate Commissioner for the Knowledge Utilization Division, or KU as we call it, which, as you know, is the home of the What Works Clearinghouse and your contractual home, too, at least some of the time. As you know, we rolled out a new What Works Clearinghouse website about 2 weeks ago, and we do have some webinars coming up for the public, for researcher audiences, for practitioner audiences, and for others, but we wanted to do this webinar as soon as possible. A first look for all of you because you are connected to the WWC through KU as sibling contractors, if you will. So we have folks on the phone who work on and with the REL program, on ERIC, on the National Library of Education, which is also in the KU division in NCE at IES, and of course, our What Works Clearinghouse contractor team, which is one project done by 5 different contracts along with a team of folks here at IES. Chris Weiss and Diana McCullum lead the WWC team here at IES, and they'll start the overview in just a moment. But before I turn it over to them, I want to acknowledge and thank Neil Sefter and his team at Mathematica Policy Research, and Jeff Michael and his team at Sanometrics for their tireless work on this new website, which has been many years in the making. The last 2 years specifically, but it also builds on the foundation set by many others since the early days of the WWC, which was established in 2002. I also want to thank those of you who have provided suggestions and feedback along the way. As KU sibling contractors, we know you are often using the WWC yourselves or using it when working with stakeholders. And when I talk with others, I'm often saying that the WWC relies on intermediaries and partners, and that's all of you. And that's why we're sharing this presentation with you as a first look today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Joy. I'm going to hold on and do a technical thing. Excellent. So welcome to our webinar, introducing you to the new What Works Clearinghouse website. As Joy said, I'm Chris Weiss. I'm here at IES, NCEE, and the What Works Clearinghouse. It's our pleasure to show you around the new website today. We've redesigned the site to make it easier for you to find the information that you need. I'd like to, you can probably see the online tools for questions and to be able to submit questions to us and have us answer them. We won't respond to them until the end. We'll go through the presentation and go through our introduction, but then we'll have time for you to ask specific questions. We can go back and highlight some pieces that you might have questions about and not seen, and so forth. So with the new Clearinghouse website, all the reports, the resources, and tools that you may be familiar with from the previous WWSC site are included, but some of them are in a new location. We've also added a set of new tools that we think will be of interest to many of you. And so over the next half an hour or so, we'd like to show you around the new site. This is the home page for the new WWC. This is the new home page, excuse me, for the WWC. You can see front and center at the top is Find What Works, our comprehensive source for learning what WWC systematic reviews of the research say about education programs, products, practices, and policies. We'll take an in-depth tour of Find What Works in a little bit, but wanted to highlight it now and its location on the home page. Beneath Find What Works, you'll see introductions about us, about what the WWC is, and a link to find out more information about the WWC. You'll also see a rotating highlights feature, which displays the WWC's most recent publications and events. The current one that is front and center is the one about the WWC website. If you click on this, it will take you to a video introduction, a 4-minute video that will help you learn about the site and new features of it, etc. Clicking over, you see that the next rotator is, it talks about our foundational reading skills practice guide, foundational skills to support reading. So this is a way to highlight some of the recent work that we've done and how to get it more quickly. If you scroll down further on the home page, you see a set of quick links here to our intervention reports, our practice guides, and to the reviews of individual studies database. We'll come back and talk about each of these in greater detail in a little bit, but wanted to highlight the fact that you can find each of these, links to each of these sections from the homepage. There's also then a section that allows you to connect to the WWC with the right here on the bottom of the page as well. I'll scroll back up to the top. The primary navigation tool for the site is the menu button, which is always at the top of the screen for each site. You'll see when I scroll over it, try again, that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons on the side here that are the different sections of the site. We have the About site, Find Evidence, Search Publications, Handbook and Other Resources, and the Help Desk. The About site provides an overview of the Clearinghouse, an overview about what we do, how we do it, and who conducts the work of the WWC. I'll show you one example of this one with what we do. If you click on that, it will take you to a page that displays for you a set of infographics that help understand some of the processes and procedures that we use in doing the evidence reviews that we do. I'll not click on these, but would encourage you to explore them and share them if you explore them for yourself. You have questions about what we do and how we do it, and share them. They're valuable resources for explaining the Clearinghouse and the procedures that we use. As I said, the menu button appears throughout, so we can go back to that. Find Evidence is the second section, and one where we'll, with a couple of new tools that we'll come back to in the webinar in a little bit to show off, highlight, and look at in greater depth. You can see there are 4 links here. There's Find What Works, which is from the home page as well. There's a link to Educators' Practice Guides. Our practice guides distilling evidence and offering specific suggestions on topics of interest to educators and education practitioners. Reviews of individual studies, which is our database, formerly the Reviewed Studies database. We'll look at that and how the reviews are laid out in this. And then there's data from individual studies, which allows users to go to the site, pull a file that has the information from the systematic reviews we've conducted for each of the studies, and it's particularly useful for meta-analysis and other types of research. The next section is Search Publications, which allows you to look to explore our intervention reports and practice guides. We'll come back and take a look at intervention reports in greater detail in a minute. Handbooks and other resources, which give an overview or provide information about the WWC's reviews, how we do what we do, and what we do. We have the links to the Procedures and Standards Handbook. We can go to it. Go to the site. You can see that we feature the current version of the Standards and Procedures Handbook, version 3.0. You can download that document here. There's additional reviewer guidance for use with the Standards and Procedures Handbook, and then a summary of changes between this version and the previous version. That you can also link to other prior WWC standards for reviews and download those here. You can find additional links to review protocols and some supplemental materials that might be of use and interest to WWC reviewers. The final section is the WWC Helpdesk. Here is the way that we most prefer to be contacted. You can type your email here in this field. There's a list of pull-down menu of subjects that you can choose from. You can have questions about the standards, procedures and standard handbook, about evidence standards. You can suggest a study for us to review. You can suggest an intervention for us to review. A topic that may not be covered currently. There's one to submit a question for a webinar. which is ironic and during a webinar, but we prefer you to use a W for this. However, one thing that we would, one of the elements we'd like to ask you about is, what kinds of audiences might benefit from webinars or other kinds of outreach to learn more about the Clearinghouse. Are there specific groups, types of individuals that you can think of? We have some webinars planned for the future, but if there are specific audiences that you think would be beneficial, this would be a good place to let us know about that. Or other. And there's another category for issues that don't fall within those. You also see buttons to the side here, and then you can type your message here. You see buttons to the side that also appear here as part of the Help Desk button on the menu for frequently asked questions. We have a quite extensive list of questions arranged by topic on questions about the WWC in general and how we do what we do, about publications, about Find What Works, specific questions for different types of audiences, understanding the review process, etc. So there's a number of questions that we might anticipate that we have the answers for already. The final element I want to show you here is the glossary, which is a dictionary of explains many of the terms that we use in WWC reviews or in presentation of findings. So in some cases there's additional, so for example this attrition definition, we discuss how the WWC defines attrition, and then there's a link here that will take you to our attrition standards brief that provides more information for you about the WWC's attrition standards. So as you can see, it's an extensive set of resources that we have available for you through the website. What I'd like to do now is go back to the button we didn't spend much time talking about, the Find Evidence button, and explore a couple of these sections in greater detail. Starting with the review of individual studies. You can use this to find out information about whether a particular report, particular manuscript has been reviewed by the Clearinghouse. If you are familiar with the WWC's previous reviewed studies database, this will have some elements that are familiar and some elements that are a bit different. We've changed the layout. We've hopefully made it easier for users to find the information that they need and want. Let me walk you through the different sections of this document. Each of these buttons that you see, each of these fields that you see here are pull-down menus that allow users to specify to narrow and define their search. So in this ratings one, you can see you can restrict your search to studies that met WWC standards with or without reservations, or you can specify one of two, without reservations, or with reservations, or you can search for studies that do not meet WWC standards. You do not have to select this field. It's always possible to search search the database without restrictions in this way. But for particular users, for particular kinds of needs, we wanted to make this information available to help with the search. The second pull-down menu provides information about the study design. This is available currently for only studies that meet standards with or without reservation. In the future, we'll have this available for a broader set of studies, including those that do not meet standards. Information about the study design. So we have 4 specified: randomized controlled trial, a quasi-experimental design, regression discontinuity design, or a single case design. Again, you do not have to specify, but there may be certain kinds of searches for certain kinds of purposes where it's beneficial to have that information. The final pull-down menu is a set of topics that allows you to specify the area of the WWC reviews that you are interested in. These actually mirror the Find What Works categories from the home page, but you can specify a topic like literacy or mathematics. Here you can specify also a population age range, kindergarten to 12th grade, post-secondary, etc., or specific populations such as English learners or children and youth with disabilities. there's on the second row, although not designated as a row, there's two additional search features. One, you can restrict the search to only those studies with at least one statistically significant positive finding. If you've been involved in different grant competitions, this is often a characteristic that is specified, needing as required evidence. It could also be that you want to find specific kinds of studies that find statistically significant statistically significant positive findings. So you can restrict searches through a checkbox there to toggle on and off. The final element here is a search box. You could type in a topic. You could type in a specific name of an intervention. You could type in a specific author. So, for example, Kemple. And what you find then is 13 studies. You can see that this number was 8585 with no restrictions. Looking only across studies that have the word Kemple in it. I believe Kemple only shows up as an author, but there may be other fields where Kemple shows up. And you can see manuscripts that were published or that were reviewed by Jim Kemple in this particular case. Clearing selection, to go back to our search, you see here that there are 8,585 results in this studies in the database. We're adding more to this all the time, so this will increase as we go forward, but currently that's our field of study. That's the number of studies that we have in the data set. So let's take an example. Let's walk through an example of a kind of search. So I'm going to do this in a particular kind of way, but in the question session, if you have specific kinds of searches you might want to see, we're happy to show you how they might look or how they might work using this new tool. So say we're interested in searching the literacy topic area. We can specify literacy from this, pull it, select it, and you'll see here that 8585 is now 5215. So we've restricted, there are 5,215 results that touch on some aspect of literacy in this. For this search, let's say we want to restrict we want to only look at studies that meet WWC standards with or without reservations. So we can click that, and 5215 is restricted to 226 results. Restricting them. And just to make it a little more restrictive, excuse me for that, let's say we want to look only at those studies that have at least one statistically significant positive finding. We check that box, and we see 91 results displayed 10 at a time in alphabetical order. So each of these results is a link to a study page that you can click on to find out more information about that study. So I will choose one here, Christie et al. Click on that, and you're taken to this WWC study page, or the page that contains information about the WWC review of this study. I want to highlight the features of this and talk through it as an example of how the information is organized and what you can find here. So you have in the first set of data here, the title of the study, the bibliographic information of the study here, who the authors are, where it was published, in this particular case, the citation information. You have information about the study design, a randomized control trial. If this was a quasi-experimental design, it would say quasi-experimental design here. You have the number of, in this case, students. There are 37 students in grades PK, which stands for pre-K, pre-kindergarten. Sometimes you have studies like this that are looking at a specific grade or grade level, or in this case, pre-K. Some cases, it's a range of grades 6 through 8 or 9 through 12. It all depends upon the particular features or the particular elements of the study. Moving down further, Each of these is a clickable tab with additional information about the study. I'll go through the information that's presented here with review details, but then we can look at the findings and sample characteristics, etc. You can see here a couple pieces of key information. First, that this study was rated as meeting WWC standards without reservations. Secondly, it is that it contains at least one statistically significant positive finding. If it did not, this box wouldn't appear. If it did not meet standards, this box would not appear, or would be grayed to indicate that it did not meet standards. So for certain kinds for study searches, this kind of information is very key. We wanted to highlight it for users to make it very available, and one of the first things that's immediately seen on this page. What you have below are additional elements about the review. So and this snapshot, this is a clickable link. This study, Christie et al., was reviewed as part of the Doors to Discovery intervention report. I'll click on that and we can explore what that looks like in just a moment here, but it tells you the purpose of it. In other cases, they might be reviewed for a different intervention report. It could have been reviewed for a grant competition. It could have been reviewed as a single study for itself. There's multiple reasons why that information is contained here. Using these two fields specify the review protocol that was used in conducting this review. In this case, the Early Childhood Education Review Protocol. Protocols, this will take us a little far afield, so let me quickly summarize by saying review protocols specify the parameters of a review that the WWC conducts. It specifies the outcomes looked at, the time period of research that is examined as part of the literature review, types of interventions that would be eligible for this, a number of different parameters that specify the search and the review. So you can click on this as well. It would take you to the review protocol so you could learn more about the specifics of it. And it was reviewed under Standards and Procedures version 2.1. Similarly, you could click on this button and it would take you to the Procedures and Standards Handbook 2.1 to specify what the elements of that review. Cool. So, going back up, each of these, as I said, is clickable and presents different information here. So what you see here are the study findings. There are two, let's walk across this. This is an oral language outcome, specifically the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test, version 3, or PPVT3. And then this is in the domain of print knowledge outcomes, and the specific outcome measure is developing skills, checklists, concepts of print subtest. For each outcome, you have the same information. You have organized here the outcome measure itself, comparison group, usually business as usual, but sometimes there will be there might be another intervention that is compared to, the period of outcome examined, the sample, in this case 37 preschool children, the intervention mean on this test, the comparison group mean on this test, whether the study was whether the finding was statistically significant, and whether the measure of the improvement index here. Note that each of these topics has a small I beside it, so you can get more information here. An outcome defined by the WWC is the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that are attained as the result of an activity. An outcome measure is the instrument, device, or method that provides data on the outcome. Similar information here. This finding was statistically significant, which is why we have at least one statistically significant positive finding, and the improvement index is positive as well. You can get detailed information about the sample characteristics. This varies a bit in terms of what is displayed depending upon what the authors reported. This study was done in an urban setting. conducted in the South, actually conducted in Texas, I believe, from the study you'll see on the next slide. You have the information here about the study itself, where the study was conducted, in some cases where the study is conducted, a large metropolitan area in the Southwest United States, information about how the study was drawn, the intervention group, comparison group, description of the outcome, and support for implementation. Whatever information is available is usually contained within this. And then in some cases, there might be additional reports or additional documents, manuscripts that relate to this study that is contained in the additional sources tab. Pardon me. So, if all of the 8,000, well, most of the studies that are contained within the reviewed studies database have similar information here. You can find out information about what the review was done, when it was conducted, what the study findings were, information about the sample, etc. This, as I mentioned earlier, this particular study was reviewed as part of the Doors to Discovery Intervention Report. I'm going to click on this link here to take us to the Doors to Discovery Intervention Report. I mentioned earlier that you could also find if you go to search publications, you can click here and go to intervention reports and find the same study. It will take you to the same place. It's really just a matter of how you get there. So if you click on this tab, what comes up is what we've labeled the evidence snapshot of this intervention report. There's a few key pieces of information here I want to highlight for you. First and foremost, you can download the intervention report itself here by clicking. This is a PDF, but if you click this link, it will download for you the PDF of the intervention report that would have complete details of all the information that's presented on this page, as well as additional pieces of information. You have first here in the sort of larger font a summary of what was found. So Doors to Discovery was found to have potentially positive effects on oral language and print knowledge, and no discernible effects on phonological processing and math for preschool children. You have a little bit more information here about the specifics of the intervention, a description of what it is and how it works. You have information here. There in this particular intervention report, there were 3 studies that met standards out of 4 eligible studies reviewed. And then you can see below information summarizing different research about research in different outcome domains. For this particular one, there was mathematics achievement was assessed, oral language was assessed, phonological processing, and print knowledge. If you scroll further down, and I'll come back up to talk about the demographic characteristics in just a moment here. If you scroll further down, you can get more information about the WWC Summary of Evidence for Doors to Discovery. You can see the Early Childhood Education Review Protocol again. Other research in the areas that connect to this particular intervention, mathematics, early childhood, and literacy, and then a set of related studies that might be of interest if you're looking at this intervention. On the right is a column that contains information about the characteristics of the samples that were used in the studies in this intervention report. In this case, for the 3 studies that met standards. So pooling that information, this is what the racial and ethnic composition of the samples that reported this information, how they look. There's information about gender breakdown, how the intervention is delivered, and whether or not it's an urban setting or not. So all interrelated studies, and then if you wanted to go at it this way, we can click here to go to the intervention page itself. This is the summary of the evidence on this. You can click on the intervention, and you see specifically about the elements here that and you can click further to find out which studies contributed to the assessment of print knowledge. The Christie study is the one that we looked at previously, so you've seen that. You could also click on Acel et al. And find out more about how, look at the research findings from that study as relate to doors to discovery on print knowledge. Cool. And I'd like to switch gears now to take you to Find What Works. We'll go to it from Find Evidence, Find What Works from Systematic Reviews. So, as I said before, Find What Works is the What Works Clearinghouse's comprehensive source for learning what the reviews of research say about education programs, products, practices, and policies. There's a few different ways to get to this, from the home page, from the menu, etc. And each of these, what I didn't mention earlier, is that it's not just a chalkboard layout, but each of these is a clickable field. So we spend a bit of time in literacy. We can switch to look at mathematics. You click on mathematics. And this is where we begin. So I want to talk through a few elements of what is presented. You'll see here is a listing of interventions that the Clearinghouse has reviewed that relate to math. For each of them, you see a coded box here about evidence of effectiveness. You see information about the intervention itself, or the name of the intervention. You see the grades examined and the research that has been assessed from the Clearinghouse, and a comparison tool. We'll come back and talk about that. Just to give you a quick overview here, you see that there are additional elements that you can select here. So if you wanted to look at math and early childhood, you're interested in early childhood mathematics interventions, you can select those two, and it would restrict it to that, to those interventions that focus on those grade levels. Similarly, K to 12, or you could leave it open. There are a few additional features here at the bottom. There's more filters. We'll come back and explore that in greater depth in just a minute. There's also a set of links to practice guides that connect to math. So you could, if you're interested in those, you could click on the practice guide, the educator's practice guide, Encouraging Girls in Math and Science, or others. So there are 35 interventions that appear here. As with previously, we see there's I buttons that provide more information about what the definitions mean, what, in this case, what evidence of effectiveness is. Each of these is also a sortable field. So if you clicked on, you wanted to sort these by the grades examined, you could click on this and the data would be sorted by grades. You could click on this and it would be sorted alphabetically, etc. You can also, as I said, search multiple topic areas. So let's restrict our search to math in grades K through 12, and 35 is now restricted to 23. And you have multiple boxes here, K to 12 and this math in this. One of the newest features that we want to highlight here, and one of that is particularly exciting to us, and would hopefully be to many of you as well, find research with students like yours. We can click this button, and what you see is an assessment that allows you to specify what the characteristics of your students or students that you're interested in finding similarity with, and specify your character. Let's say you're teaching younger elementary grades, K1, 2, and 3. So we can specify that. We can specify the percentage that are African American, say 30%, and let's say 40% white, 41% white, because why not? There's additional elements: ethnicity, gender, class type, whether it's a whole class or specific kind of intervention or mainstream intervention. There's school type. You can specify whether it's a public school or charter school, etc. Urbanicity level or region state. Specify all you wish, then click Done. And what you get then is an additional column of information here that tells you students like yours, or that assesses whether the research or the extent to which the research was conducted on students like yours. The greater the number of shaded ovals, the greater the degree of similarity to students like yours. Let's click on one of the interventions that's listed here and get more detail. So this is a mathematics intervention that has been reviewed as part of multiple different research reviews. We'll look only at the mathematics one, elementary school mathematics here. There are 3 studies that meet standards, and we can click on that link to expand them. And you see here that in 2 cases, this nunnery study and the second Seldijk study, there's the number of ovals is shaded as only 1. Recall from earlier when we specified what students like ours are like, we said they're only K1, 2, and 3. So 4th and 5th grade student populations are not totally dissimilar. It's not as dissimilar as if they were done in high school, but it's not as similar as ones that were done in 2 to 5. We can click on that information there, and it will show us that the research sample that was done for this study is very similar to the characteristics that we specified in terms of grade and race. If we look at this study, it's not very similar in terms of grade or race. So additional information that will help help you specify, or could help specify in terms of finding research that meets, that is most like students like yours and therefore most relevant to your context. We have an additional set of filters that are stronger screens here at the bottom, more filters. In this case, we can specify K1, 2, 3. And you see, as I specify, the number changes. So this was clear all, back to it, more filters. We have 23 results, and when we specify we want grades K1, 2, 3, we end up with 10 results. So, find research on students like yours, it's a degree of comparability, but it won't eliminate study interventions. This one does. This will restrict it only to those where the research was conducted in grades 1, 2, and 3, or K1, 2, and 3. You'll notice also something we haven't talked about here, which is the compare feature, which allows users to select interventions and find comparison. It presents information that allows a user to compare features and characteristics, not so much on the assessment of the evidence and its findings, but about characteristics. So, let me before I show you this result, let me show you. I chose 3 that have evidence of effectiveness and positive effects in math, positive or potentially positive effects in math, and where we have 3 ovals for a high degree of similarity to the students like mine, such as I've specified them. We can click on Compare Selected, and we find out some information about each of the 3: the name of the intervention, the grades examined in the review, the delivery method, small group or whole class for each of them, the degree of similarity, and then at the bottom here is an assessment of effectiveness. So we have and we can talk more about this as we look at one in just a minute, to look at what the evidence looks like for this. So let's go to Saxon Math, and we can see what the research evidence looks like for us in this realm. We have 2 studies here, one of which shows a positive effect in the improvement index, one of which does not display an improvement index, indicating indeterminate effects, which is one of the Clearinghouse ratings. So the pooled together, this is responsible for the overall effect of the overall assessment of the effect for this particular intervention. So we've gone on for 40 minutes now. This concludes what I'd intended and what I plan to show you guys for the new site. There's much more that we could explore. We could return to explore some of the elements we've looked at. We could look at some of the elements that we've not explored. And we would encourage you to submit your questions through the online forum for the webinar. But if we don't get to them as well, or if you have additional questions later, to please use the help desk to contact us to send us your suggestions, ideas, thoughts, and potential improvements for that. So with that, we're going to pause and okay. And so we have our first question here. So the question reads: when you search for individual study, the database included 8,500 more references. Is 8585 the number of studies that have been reviewed? So sorry, I read that sort of fast. The core question is, and so you can see what we're discussing as we do this. There are 8,585 individual studies or studies results here. The 8585 reflects the number of studies that have been screened and or reviewed by the WWC. This includes eligible studies and ineligible studies. Of the citations here, you can search the studies that meet standards with or without reservations using these different fields and parameters as we discussed earlier.
All right, so I'll go to another question we received. Hi everybody, good afternoon. This is Diana McCullum. So the question is, will REL products that relate to WWC practice guides will be featured on the site, and how will you do that? So I'll ask Chris to be able to demonstrate that for us, but the answer is yes. We're still going to feature REL products associated with practice guides, and they'll be listed as additional resources for each of the guides when they exist. So an easy example we have is the Teaching Academic Content and Literacy to English Learners in Elementary School Practice Guide. Right now, if you go to the Additional Resources tab, you see that there is a REL product on the Professional Learning Community's Facilitators Guide. So, what we've tried to do with the new site is to highlight these a bit more, so to the extent to which they're available, they will be featured alongside the guides.
We can also take a moment here to talk about the practice guides themselves. I beg your pardon. Many of you may be familiar with the guides. We've taken the information from them, and you can, first of all, you can download the full guide itself here. But we've presented the different the recommendations from the practice guides sequentially here. So this is for this particular guide, Teaching Academic Content and Literacy to English Learners in Elementary and Middle School. We have 4 different specific recommendations. You can see the recommendations as they're listed here. For example, recommendation 1, teach a set of academic vocabulary words intensively across several days using a variety of instructional activities. And you can see information here with this circle about the level of evidence for that. So recommendations 1 and 2 have strong evidence. There's moderate evidence for recommendation 4, and minimal evidence for recommendation 3. With additional resources, as Diana said, we have the Professional Learning Communities Guide here. In a couple of other examples, we can pull one up. So, for example, Teaching Strategy for Improving Algebra Knowledge in Middle and High School Students. We have the report, the recommendations, and then below we have a practice guide summary and a couple of videos that help in this case, that elaborate, give an overview of it, and then a second one that discusses the levels of evidence and specifically the level of evidence for this practice guide. So where we have these available, they will be available connected to the specific practice guides. that they're connected to.
Sure. We'll go to the next question. Where are the single study reviews? And I think this question is asking about how do you find the single study reviews as reports. So maybe we can go back to the home page.
Yes.
So as you all saw on the home page when Chris demonstrated how to find different products, you can find intervention reports and practice guides. We are actually not producing single study reviews as reports anymore, but they are available when they do exist. And the reason is that studies are being more quickly and efficiently added to the individual studies database, and so we're able to review more studies in a definitely a more efficient way. But I'll just walk through how you'd find a study that has a single study review in case you wanted to look at the report. So you'd go to Find Evidence, Reviews of Individual Studies, and you can search Olson.
Olson, O-L.
S-O-N. Great. Of course, the search
Prolific.
is different from when I did it. But if you click on, yes.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
You're getting something different from me. Sorry, just a moment. Oh, sorry.
Okay, wait.
On the wrong?
Yeah, we, hold on. That was my fault. What's the timing? A randomized control. Oh, it's Kim, this one here. Yes.
Sorry about that. Well, that is the study that has a single study review. So if you click on the drop-down menu, you can actually get a sense of the different products that a study's been reviewed for. I think many of you are aware studies can be reviewed for multiple products, but you can see it's been reviewed for the practice guide, for a grant competition, and then if you click on single study review, you are able to actually pull up the single study review report. So we will still have the reports listed on the website, but again, all reviews of individual studies are going to go directly into the individual studies database.
So one, an additional feature, did we discuss this? So someone asked about what's available in terms of downloading data from individual studies. And this is, sorry, I went here without describing what I did. This is if you search on the tab for Find Evidence, and then look at the bottom, it's the data from individual studies, will take you to this page. What you have here, is this is an extraction tool that pulls information from the database. It's part of our approach you see in the second paragraph here, our approach to open data and to increase transparency. This is a file that's updated continuously and provides information from reports on a single study to a systematic review of all studies on an sorry, I'm reading that part, and that's not exactly what I mean. This is information about the particular studies that are included in the reviewed studies database. It's a flat file. It's stored in Excel, I believe, when you click on this, and it will allow you to get information about what's been reviewed, and has information about the context in which the study was conducted, the findings themselves, bibliographic information, a number of things that would be useful for different kinds of research purposes. So this is available to anyone that wants to do it. They can click there and then use the information for their own research.
Exactly. No, I was just going to say that one reason this might be useful, we've received requests over time from the RELs or even from individual researchers looking to find the full data on studies that have been reviewed, looking for the full study review guide information. And with this flat file now, you'll be able to download that data and conduct your own research as needed.
Yeah, Ish.
All right, so we'll do another. So the question is the Students Like Yours feature intended to be a comprehensive way to map your students to those students that have been examined in some of the existing studies? So if you don't mind going back to the Students Like Yours feature. So our intention with the Students Like Yours feature is for it to serve as really a guide and a filter to help decision makers think a little bit more critically about their populations and think about some of the characteristics that matter to them. So I know as Chris walked through this example, you can choose some of these characteristics, but it's not necessary that you select all of these characteristics. And this feature, it really, as Chris described it, it's more of a guide. So these aren't hard filters. So for example, if you're clicking on the race or ethnicity element, you don't have to know the exact percentage of white African-American students in your population, but it's intended to serve as a guide so that decision makers can say, well, how much does this element matter to me, and how much does it matter that students are the same in existing studies on this element compared to other elements. And so as we have this information, we just wanted to make it more accessible and easily available for folks to think about.
Right. You can specify the different elements here. We didn't look at the other ones, but if you wanted to specify if you have a rural school district and you want to only, highlight to focus on the research that's been done on students in rural districts, we can do that, and it will come up with. You see here that there are. There's some interventions that have been where it's been conducted in rural areas, those with a higher degree of similarity with students like yours, and some that where we probably don't have much information about that. So you can always go back in as well and click and unselect the filter or add additional ones. Let's do school type. We're interested in charter schools, parochial schools, private or public. You have that information to be done, to be used as well in the screening. So we've tried to make the tools maximally flexible so that they can serve a variety of purposes and a variety of audiences, to be useful, to have the information that's contained in our reviews useful to as many as we can, to many different kinds of audiences and individuals as we can. We could look, are there other ones that we have spooled up?
Sure. So there's a question asking if there's a place on the website that explains the terms potentially positive, extent of evidence. So we can certainly walk through how you would find them. So if you want to go through the Find What Works portal, you can click on ELs, and we can walk through an example.
Okay, which one? We go to Find What Works, and then...
Sure. And then English Learner, and then...
Which one?
Click on the second report.
Okay, cool.
And so I think the question was asking where the definitions are for these ratings. So you'll see that we have these information buttons next to key elements like the outcome domain, but for this question, the question is about the effectiveness ratings. So here we have the definitions for what positive means, potentially positive, mixed, no discernible, potentially negative, and then negative effects.
So there was a question about potentially positive. Is that what I think the specific question was? So you can see here it's shown as the single plus on this, excuse me, I'll pull this so you can see it on this bar here. So reading achievement, oops, excuse, I didn't mean to do that. Reading achievement we have is positive, which is we described as strong evidence that an intervention had a positive effect on outcomes. For the English language development outcome domain, we have, click again, potentially positive evidence that the intervention had a positive effect on outcomes with no overriding contrary evidence. Mixed evidence is evidence that the intervention's effect on outcomes is inconsistent. No discernible effects is no evidence that the intervention had an effect on outcomes. and then potentially negative and negative. You can also see a link here that will take you to the glossary to find more on the rating of effectiveness, if you want that. To reiterate what Diana said, each of the information buttons here has, it gives you a synopsis or a bit of information about this, but each of them, most of them have a link to the glossary that would take you, that would take you to the glossary to help you to learn more about, in this case, study rating, effectiveness rating, improvement index, and so forth. So study meeting standards, the number of studies that meet WWC design standards and provide evidence of effectiveness.
So maybe we can stay here. We had an additional question asking whether you're able to find out whether a study has substantively important effects. And so if you click on the first study, right now the information that we've featured is whether a study meets Clearinghouse standards and whether there are statistically significant positive findings. So, but to find further information, you'd be able to click in the flat file and look at the effect sizes. But right now, it's just the study design, whether it meets Clearinghouse standards, and whether there are positive effects. So we have about 5 minutes. I don't know if there are more questions. Please send them in. We have one more question. We thought everybody might be interested in this one. Will there be more website refinement? So I'll let Chris handle this one.
Yes. Yes, there are. Yes, there will be more website refinements. We are continue. This is true throughout our work. We are continuously striving to improve and be transparent in our process. I mentioned in the review in reviewing in the reviewed studies database that we are intending to add information. Sorry, I can't do two things at once. That we're intending to include design information about for studies that don't meet standards. So we'll have additional information there. Some of the other specific improvements that will feature, well, yes, there's an ongoing list of that. I'm a little overwhelmed trying to pick just one to talk about, but we are continually working to improve and enhance and expand what we have. We'll also be doing, to put in a plug for this, we'll also be doing additional webinars and perhaps some, we'll have additional videos as well that will help to highlight features of the new website, explain how to find the information that you want. I'll go back to the home page to encourage you to take this video tour to show you about the new features and resources. We'll have an additional one that will highlight features of Find What Works. We have ideas about additional webinars that will be coming up, but as I said at the outset, especially from you guys, we'd love to have your thoughts and ideas and suggestions about other audiences we might reach, other ways that we might reach them, things that we might do to both help others learn about the new site and the information that's contained within, and to get feedback, to learn more about what would be useful to people, what would be improvements, what would be new directions that we could go with. So please do send us email. Please do be in touch. Please let us know your thoughts. We would be very, very happy to hear from you. And with that, I think we will thank you all for your participation. Thank you for your excellent questions as well. Thanks to Joy and to everyone that has been involved in the production and launch of the site. And we hope this has been useful to you. Thank you very much.